I'm Mike Pickett. In remembrance of Martin Luther King on this day of his birthday, I offer the following comments. It's an amazing and curious thing what people by their nature will do for money and recognition. Aspiration to obtain the honors of men and money motivates the natural man to a dangerous degree, and all too often leads to participation in activities related to the dark side of human activity. It is natural for people by their nature to misjudge the hearts and desires of men and women who appear to be selfishly massaging their own egos, when in fact the opposite is true. They are really sacrificing their selfish interests for the benefit of all. Only unselfish people can tell the difference. Dr. Martin Luther King was not a natural man. A study of King's life and work, his actions and comments can only lead one to the conclusion that his motivation was to aspire to the works and designs of a higher power by selfless service to his fellow men. The record demonstrates that Martin King could not be bought by power and or money. Unfortunately, for the good people of the United States of America, this fact led to his early demise. It certainly wasn't a racial issue. Had King been allowed to continue, he was on a track that would have revealed to the world the true motivation and globalist mentality involved in the determinations of a few elite power-hungry moneymongers since 1914, whose sinister purpose has been to rule the world and control the activities of all of mankind, referred to by George H.W. Bush in his now famous New World Order speech in June 2006 as the rule of law. In April 1968, 1 year after making a powerful speech in protest of the decade-long war in Vietnam that continued under the administration of the then President of the United States, Lyndon Baines Johnson, Martin Luther King was evidently shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee, USA, by a co-conspiring Memphis policeman. The shooting occurred just prior to King's leading a huge protest march on Washington, D.C. After attending a trial in Memphis in 1999, the result of a modest $100 civil lawsuit brought to prove the truth by Coretta Scott King, Martin's widow, against Lloyd Jowers, one of the alleged conspirators to the death of her husband, Jim Douglas made the following comments. Quote, "This historic trial was so ignored by the media that apart from the courtroom participants, I was the only person who attended it from beginning to end. What I experienced in that courtroom ranged from inspiration at the courage of the Kings, their lawyer investigator William F. Pepper, and the witnesses, to amazement at the government's carefully interwoven plot to kill Dr. King. The seriousness with which U.S. intelligence agencies planned the murder of Martin Luther King speaks eloquently of the threat Kingian nonviolence represented to the powers that be in the spring of 1968. 32 years after Memphis, we know that the government that now honors Dr. King with a national holiday also killed him, as will once again become evident when the Justice Department releases the findings of its limited reinvestigation into King's death. The government is continuing its cover-up just as it continues to do in the closely related murders of John and Robert Kennedy and Malcolm X." End of quote. The checks and balances system, set up by the founders of the United States, provided three distinct divisions of the United States government: legislative, executive, and judicial. Thomas Jefferson warned the future generations not to ever let the powers of government become concentrated in the executive branch, or we would have tyranny. The free people of the United States should be alarmed that the actions of the executive branch are simply referred to as actions by the government, when it is clearly the autonomous actions of the executive branch, and most often without the support of either of the other two branches. So, with a weak justice system and an even weaker legislature, how can the executive branch be stopped in its self-generating and relentless power grab? Too bad the media does not make the distinction clear, but then one must consider who owns the media. Another problem with seeking truth through the media is that the nature of the common man leads to consider anyone who is on television to be informed and smart. It's becoming increasingly more evident that all too often this is not the case, so much as that the talking heads aspire to the honors of men and money more than to the honors of truth. After all, they would not be on television without the support of the owners of the networks, so they rationalize that a little truth is better than none at all, and thereby rationalize their positions and tell lies instead of the truth. The real problem is not always that they lie, it is that they don't tell the whole truth when it is the whole truth that holds the integrity of the story. Martin Luther King's speech against the war in Vietnam included the following comments that are very interesting. Quote, "A true revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth. With righteous indignation, it will look across the seas and see individual capitalists of the West investing huge sums of money in Asia, Africa, and South America, only to take the profits out with no concern for the social betterment of the countries and say, 'This is not just.' It will look at our alliance and with the landed gentry of South America and say, 'This is not just.' The Western arrogance of feeling that it has everything to teach others and nothing to learn from them is not just." End of quote. What do you think? Did this speech cause the corporate establishment to require the elimination of a powerful influence against their clandestine cause to rule? Sam Ervin, special counsel and chairman of the Committee on Government Operations during the investigation of the Nixon administration in 1974, it was called Watergate, said this, quote, "The Constitution was made to guard the people against the dangers of good intentions. There are men of all ages who mean to govern. They promise to be good masters, but they mean to be masters. The Constitution was written primarily to keep the government from being masters of the American people." End of quote. Now, Sam Ervin was a Democrat. Do you think it matters? The real problems arise and fall with the determinations of each individual, not the political parties that they support. There are those with good intentions and bad intentions in both parties. However, as long as the global elitists can keep the people of the country focused on the under issues and arguing amongst themselves on a political level, whether on the street or on the radio or television, it keeps their focus off the whole truth and off of them until they can complete their clandestine and sinister agenda. Keep an eye out, and you will see that their confidence has now grown to the point that they are sure of themselves, that they will definitely prevail, and are now making their conspiracies bolder and more public. There are those, and the numbers are growing rapidly, there are those of us that would not support their plan. This has been profoundly demonstrated by the recent Russian demand for firearms and ammunition by the citizens of the United States in preparation for a move by the executive branch to take more control. The world control freaks are ignoring the Second Amendment of the Constitution. Will this eventually lead to an old Western showdown? Will the soldiers and the policemen of the United States executive branch support the tyrants in their determination to take over the world? They were good soldiers that crucified Christ. If you think that conspiracy is only a theory, you're right where the conspirators want you to be. Now let it be known that this writer respects the rights to make choices by individuals, whatever those choices might be. However, it is imperative that before a stand can be taken, and the responsibility that comes with that stand, one must have all of the information necessary to take it with conviction. Wherever the globalist imperial system has been implemented in the world, the result has been an increase in poverty and starvation for the countries that have become indebted to it. The United States is rapidly on the verge of following suit. Another choice is to have no conviction at all, to remain asleep and do nothing, trusting that others will make the right stand on your behalf. If that is your choice, you're already in the sight of those who would have subservience to all of their self-aggrandizing whims. History is clear. Christ was crucified by ignorant people like that, who thought he was on an ego trip, like all other natural men. Where do you stand? Can you be bought? Or are you a subscriber to what Patrick Henry so eloquently put forth in a powerful speech urging the Continental Congress to sign the Declaration of Independence? Quote, "Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery?" End of quote. Martin Luther King, Coretta's attorney, William Pepper, and others had the courage to make a choice. Standing firmly with Patrick Henry, they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, just as the founders did when this great free country was established. Was it for the honors of men or for money? I doubt it. Who among us has that kind of courage? It is impossible to support both sides of an issue. It's impossible to serve two masters at the same time. But there are some courageous people, and the numbers are growing, who choose to defend to the death the right to freely make these important choices. Has the time come when we will be forced to take a stand for one side or the other? Yes, it has. The time is now. Choose wisely, for the benefit of all mankind, not to satisfy a natural ego. Your importance to others is not acquired by pounding drums and waving banners to get attention to oneself. But the world is a noisy place, and warning others is most often naturally mistaken for a sales pitch, or to salve the egos of the warners. Bitcoin is like that. Those of us who are telling others about Bitcoin are not selling our egos. We're warning as many as we can to be prepared for things to come. The natural man will ignore warnings because he mistakes it for personal aggrandizement and for the warner to salve his own ego when the exact opposite is true. Stay informed and be prepared. There's a crisis looming. Babylon will fall. Don't you fall with it. I'm Mike Pickett. I'll see you next time. Stay righteous and sleep peacefully tonight, knowing that your savings are in your own custody.
Listen to the wind in the junipers and the tales of the shifting, whispering sands.